toddly.
Hey there guys, Nordic Warrior here, welcome back to my video game review series. First of all, my apologies for the length of time it took me to make this video. I actually intended to finish it weeks ago, but I've been very busy lately and I've had a lot going on. You'll be happy to know, however, that I'm back on track now, and there'll be a lot of content coming to the channel in the near future. Those of you who saw my last video will know that I reviewed the original Croc Legend of the Gobbos from 1997 for the PS1. Which is a childhood favourite of mine and one of the first games I ever owned. Today we're going to be looking at the sequel and the final Croc game to be released on console, Croc 2, released in 1999, developed by Argonaut Games. So Croc 2 came out at an interesting time. The first game was, in my personal opinion, one of the most underrated platformers on the PS1. As good as the game was, it never received the same amount of hype or promotion as some of its competitors. Games like Crash Bandicoot, Spyro and Rayman, of course, all went on to become huge franchises that are still going strong today. Croc, for whatever reason, went completely into obscurity after this game came out. My personal experience with Croc 2 is a bit weird. I loved the first one so much as a kid, but for some reason I actually never got round to buying this one until very recently. Thankfully I was able to buy the game on eBay, in good quality for a reasonable price, and complete it 100% for the first time ever, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. Just like the first game, the game is a classic third-person action-adventure platformer, where you play as Croc, the lovable young crocodile, who was raised by a tribe of cute, fluffy creatures known as Gobbos. The game begins with an intro that shows a new character known as the Inventor Gobbo, putting the finishing touches to one of his machines. While he's on his way home, he comes across a creepy ritual. The Dantinis, who are these creepy, demonic creatures, do this to summon the evil Baron Dante, who was the main villain of the first game. The inventor Gobbo is then sadly kidnapped. Meanwhile, Croc and his Gobbo friends are having fun playing at the beach on Gobbo Island, when a bottle washes up on shore. The bottle contains a letter that appears to be from Croc's birth parents, who have been looking for him. This leads to the king of the Gobbos who raised Croc, telling him about other islands that contain various Gobbo tribes, sending Croc on a quest to find his parents. When setting out on his quest, Croc comes across these Gobbo tribes and learns of Baron Dante's return. Each tribe's respective island has been invaded by the Dantinis, and Croc will have to traverse the game, defeating the Dantinis and saving each village. The game is very similar to the first in terms of its overall formula, but there are a few small changes. First of all, rather than each island being made up of select levels, you will instead get a hub world to explore. Here you can look around each area and speak to its inhabitants, who will usually have some funny and interesting things to say. Unlike the first game, where the story and the narrative was told purely through visuals and implications, This game actually has dialogue. Croc will speak to the various gobbos using their language, and you will get subtitles for each conversation. The game's dialogue is pretty funny and quite adorable. Each hub world will have its own visual style and aesthetic, which depends on the style and culture of the tribe that occupies it. You have 4 different hub worlds and 4 different gobbo tribes. You have the Sailor Gobbos, the Cossack Gobbos, the Caveman Gobbos, and the Inca Gobbos. They all look unique, though they all sound the same. These hub worlds will each have a bunch of levels to enter into. What I like about the game too is that there is a huge amount of variety in terms of the game's level design. Some levels have your classic action-adventure platformer formula, with Croc simply traversing the levels, platforming, defeating enemies, and hunting for collectibles. Others will have a more unique function, and will be less formulaic. For example, levels where Croc will have to operate a minecart and figure out his way through maze-like tunnels, avoiding obstacles and hazards along the way. There are several levels like this. There are levels where you have to fly using some kind of gadget or vehicle, and even a level where you ride a giant snowball. Each level will have its own visual style and aesthetic, usually dependent on which island you're on. There are levels where you have to chase someone, such as a thief or an escaped animal. There are even a couple of racing levels, for example a boat race and a car race. These are a lot of fun. Traversing these levels can be challenging, since the platforming in the game does require some quick reflexes and good timing, but it's a bit easier than the first game. One improvement made from the first game is the overall controls. In the first game the controls were mostly perfect, but certain things like making sharp turns and jumping diagonally were a bit unrefined, and Croc sometimes felt a bit stiff. In this game Croc feels much quicker and much more fluid, and the controls and gameplay feel a bit more refined than before. As far as the game's combat, it's practically the same as the first game. Once again, Croc can strike enemies with his tail, and once again most enemies can be defeated in one hit. Most enemies will also respawn just like in the first game. The main enemies in the game are the Dantinis, which once again come in various different forms. Some of them use melee attacks, others use ranged attacks. These can be annoying. The combat isn't exactly difficult, but neither is it insultingly easy or anything like that. I'd say it has a good balance, and the combat feels about right to me. In addition to the game's combat and general gameplay, you also once again have several collectibles to find and obtain. You once again have crystals scattered all over the levels. These serve a different function from the first game. In the first game they basically acted the same way as the rings from the Sonic the Hedgehog games, with them giving Croc an extra hit point. The more of them you had, the more chance you had of recollecting them after getting hit. In this game the crystals act as currency. There are 100 of them to find in each level, some of them simply lying about, others hidden in breakable boxes. If you find all 100 of them in a particular level, then Croc's health will automatically fill. Speaking of health, in the first game Croc only had 1 hit point, and could fortify this by carrying crystals, like Sonic with his rings, and you could collect extra lives along the way. In this game it's a bit different. Croc will instead have a certain amount of hit points, which will depend on the amount of heart pots collected. You start the game off with 3 heart pots, and can collect up to 9 of them, meaning these will act as both an extra hit point for Croc when he takes damage, as well as extra life if Croc falls. I actually prefer how it worked in the first game however, since in that game you could accumulate many more extra lives, and this gave you a bit more room for error. Though to be fair, the first game is much harder than this, so maybe it made sense to do it this way. But I digress. You will also find these gongs in some of the levels. By hitting these with Croc's tail, they act as checkpoints where Croc can respawn if you fail. I mentioned before that the crystals act as currency. They can be spent at Swap Meet Pete's General Store, which is a shop that can be accessed on each island. Here you can buy various useful items, some of which can be used to reach areas and collectibles that are otherwise unreachable or unobtainable. These items are coloured jellies. These can be placed onto predetermined markers that allow Croc to bounce up and reach certain areas. It's wise to always have some of these in your backpack, since you never know when you might need one. You can also buy these items called Clockwork Gobbos. These are basically clockwork toys that Croc can use to enter certain areas, and control them remotely for a short time to collect some collectibles. You will have to be quick though, since these run out pretty quickly. Again, it's wise to carry several of them because they really do come in handy. You can also buy extra hot pots here, but like I said before, you can only hold 9 of them. The Swap Meets Pete shop feature adds some replay value to the levels, since you may need to go back here to purchase a particular item to obtain a particular collectible. In addition to the crystals, you also have bonus collectibles. Each level that isn't a boss level will once again have 5 coloured gems to find. These are usually quite easy to find, but some of them are hidden in obscure locations, and many of them require a specific item to obtain, such as a coloured jelly or a clockwork gobbo, so be sure to keep your inventory stocked, and keep an eye out for them. By finding all 5 coloured gems in a level, you unlock a chance to obtain a golden gobbo. These golden gobbos are used to unlock a bonus level. There is one bonus level in each hub world, and you can access it by obtaining all the golden gobbos from each level. In these bonus levels there will be a puzzle piece, just like in the first game. Finding all the puzzle pieces unlocks the game's bonus levels. There are a series of challenges where Croc will have to acquire several eggs that have been stolen by the Dantinis. It's a nice little extra set of challenges, if a bit simplistic, but I enjoyed it. The game also has several boss battles. Each hub world will have 2 bosses in it. You have a regular boss that can be accessed via a level, and you have the main boss that is unlocked after completing every level in the village. The boss battles are kinda lame if I'm being honest. They're not the worst boss battles ever, but I did prefer the ones in the first game personally. These ones, while very easy, were a bit awkward and poorly designed. It's not one of the game's strongest points. To be fair, they do look pretty cool though. You once again get a cutscene before each of the game's main bosses introducing them, as well as when you defeat them. Once again you take on Baron Dante twice, just like in the first game. So yeah, all in all the game is a pretty good classic 90s platformer. It took the formula from the first game and improved on it a bit, adding a bit more level variety and a few more features. In some ways it's a more complete version of the game. The controls and gameplay are a bit more fluid, and a bit more accessible also. The game is very short however, and it ends kind of abruptly. Sure, there's plenty of replay value since you may have to repeat the levels to acquire some of the collectibles you may have missed, but for some reason I enjoyed replaying the levels in the first game a bit more. I think the first game had a bit more of a simple, straightforward premise, and I think the simplicity kinda suited it. The game has good graphics for the time also, and some very good character models, and the environments look great. There are plenty of cutscenes to convey the story, and these look great also. Just like the first game, the game has a fantastic soundtrack, with music that suits each level perfectly. Some of the music is reused from the first game, and you have several new tracks, each of which sound great. So that's pretty much all I have to say about Croc 2. It's a great platformer for the time, and it ended the Croc series on a high note for sure. I know there were some Croc mobile games that got released later, as well as a Game Boy Color version of Croc 2 which I think was a bit less known. Interestingly, Croc 3 was planned, yet never got made as far as I'm aware. Who knows if the series could have been able to match the likes of Crash and Spyro in terms of popularity. I guess we'll never know. Either way, both games are great and I will love to revisit them from time to time. I give Croc 2 a solid 8 out of 10, a great game. Thanks for watching guys, I really enjoyed replaying and reviewing Croc 2. Stay tuned for more content on the channel. I have several character profiles currently in production, as well as lots of video game reviews. Let me know what you guys think. Thanks for watching and God bless.